I'm Cash Choate. I'm the owner of Choate Engineering Performance. And today I'm going to answer a few of your questions. But before I do, I wanted to thank everyone who makes this show possible. And I wanted to say how excited I am for our new studio that we're in today. So with that being said, let's get started on some of your questions. All right, so the first one comes from Native Outdoors. Okay. He says, are y'all worried that your self-oiling valve covers will rob oil from the turbo bearings causing failure? That's a really good question. We get asked that quite often. So there's a lot of math that was involved in the production or the manufacturing of these and the design. So we made sure to not take any oil that was going to be detrimental to the turbocharger itself. And there's an orifice that's actually inside of our valve covers that other folks have made similar type items like that. But we have done the math and regulated through the orifice to make sure that no oil was robbed and no turbo bearings were hurt in the making of this valve cover. It also does not drop the pressure 1 psi, so there is no concern there. However, it definitely makes a huge difference through the performance gains, longevity of the rocker arms, and like I said, the oil. If you've watched our other videos, the oil temperatures have really been benefited by this by as much as 5 degrees, and not to mention the noise decibels have been brought down about 12. So it's a big plus for guys with the 6-spool oil. So thanks for asking. Great question. All right, so here's question 2 from Freddie Hollingsworth. He says, I just picked up a 2005 crew cab Lariat F250 6.0. It has had one odor and was a farm truck, and I'm getting it studded in 2 weeks. If you're in my shoes, would you have the new OEM lifters put in while the cab's off? Also, it has zero blow-by at the oil cap when cold or warm. Is that a bad thing? So that's a really good question. I would highly suggest replacement of the lifters while you're in there. There's a couple of reasons why. The 6-liter is a HEUI injection system engine, which is hydraulically actuated, electronically controlled unit injector. Now that's a mouthful, but it is really important to note that it uses the oil as a hydraulic for the injectors to fire. In doing so, we know through the combined gas law that there is a heat of compression that takes place through the oil system. So because of those things, it increases the amount of the oil, temperatures in the oil. It's always combating, trying to get rid of and shedding some of that heat that's in for the oil temperatures. That being said, the fastest moving part in the entire engine is the smallest bearing, which would be the needle bearings on the lifter. They tend to fail when we start seeing oil oxidation levels because, obviously, of overheating condition of the oil temperatures. So if you're already in there and you're studying the engine, it's a fantastic time to do it. However, some of the problems with that are the back set of lifters. It's not as easy as one might think because the branch tubes are in the way. Certain year models are a little worse than others, but it's worth the time to do if you're going to do it. Nothing would be worse than to go ahead and do all this work, get the heads back on it, crank the thing up, it runs 1,000 miles, and heaven forbid, it chunks a lifter, and you're in for another engine overhaul. So you'd be money ahead to replace that. For the second part of your question, it says that you've got zero blow-by when it's cold or warm. That's not a bad thing. That's fantastic. So what blow-by is, for the viewers that are watching that may not know this, is that basically the ring sealing and the relationship between the piston ring and the wall is the condition of health for your engine. As the cylinder wears and you have more thrust wear, what tends to happen is that as the piston's coming up, the combustion gases and the compressed gases can tend to slide past the ring, and what that does is it pressurizes the crankcase, thus causing blow-by, is what it's termed, to enter the crankcase, which causes a lot more problems than what most people think. It's not just a matter of checking to see what the health of the engine is, but when you have a lot of blow-by, you tend to have a lot more fuel that enters in the oil, which causes bearing wear, and you have a lot more carbon from the upper part of the cylinder that's transferred into that through the oil and through the combustion gases that take place. So that's really good to hear that your engine's healthy. So do those things, and I think you'll be money ahead. Great question. Thanks for asking. All right, guys, we've had a lot of fun, but I need to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after these messages. So, question 4. This comes from Steve Chafee. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Steve. He says, what's your thought about preheating the crank before setting the block like the old timers did? There's really not a lot of things that I can tell you that I could see that would be advantageous to this. Now, keep in mind that our bearings are no longer the same Babbitt material as were the old Model A Ford engines, and some of the bearings are actually poured in. So what we have now is a tri-bearing, it's a tri-material bearing, and it preheating the crankshaft doesn't really stand to gain anything. Now, with that being said, one of the key things that you can do when you're rebuilding an engine, and one of the major things that are overlooked because so many engine builders are not the machine shops, and so what happens is people don't make sure and go back and check this. They'll look at the crankshaft for any scoring or any damage that might have occurred during its life, but they do not check to see what kind of run out. And what I mean by run out is if if you took and you bent an axle on a four-wheeler or a truck or whatever, as you're driving down the road and with that vehicle, you'll notice a hop, basically, right? That's taking place every time that the axle is actually going into orbit, or it's vectoring outside of its axis of rotation. Okay, so the same thing happens with the crankshaft. Now, we see this a lot with diesel engines, and the reason why we see this in diesel, especially certain engines, guys that are making a lot of higher boost levels at lower RPMs, increasing the amount of torque that's on the crankshaft with sustained load because of low piston speed. That's a recipe for crankshafts to get tweaked. So we see that a whole lot. So what I would suggest, if you're doing that, the thing that I would be looking for is to make sure a proper runout is within spec. Because if it's not, we start to squeeze that layer of oil now between the bearing and the crank itself, so that it no longer has that hydrodynamic wedge to ride on, and it comes metal-to-metal contact. So the crank is actually coming in contact with the bearing, and eventually will wear down to the substrate, and then bad things really happen. So those are some things that I would definitely be looking for. So great question. Thanks for asking. All right, so for the stupid question of the week, the ones that we certainly are always looking forward to. This one comes from Cletus Hornswaggle. He says, I love driving fast and with a lot of power. You got any engines that can unleash the beast, preferably Cummins ones? Well, Cletus, you're in luck. We have our signature series engine that's known as the Caskwatch, and that is for the heavy-footed driver. So this is an engine that's designed for the 1,000 horsepower plus. This is for the guy that is looking to unleash the beast. So that's for the guy that's really into performance and wants to get every last ounce he can out of it. So if you're considering a performance engine, whether it's a Ford platform, Chevrolet platform, or Dodge, Cummins, Duramax, or Powerstroke, that would definitely be the engine for you. You can call and give us a phone call, and we'd love to go over that with you and what that build consists of. But that basically takes all of the problems that we already do fix, and then now we're going into the realm of performance. So problems solved and performance delivered. That's kind of the thought process behind that engine build. So I hope that answers that question, Cletus, and get you going. Thanks for asking. Once again, guys, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for the questions. We really appreciate it. And if you will, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Leave a comment below, and if you look below, you'll be able to see some of the social platforms that we're on. So check us out, and we really appreciate it. Audience, thanks for viewing in, and look forward to seeing you next time.